Hi, I'm back. World history, ordinary people, 15 for some reason just blew up at the end. So this will be world history for ordinary people 16. And I'm going to try to pick up where I left off. It's the same day, same time. So I was starting to talk about all the dynasties. And one thing that's tricky with this is the dynasties and the listings. They are listed not only for China, but it's split North China, South China. The dynasties can be different if you're talking about Vietnam, which had a pretty big Chinese influence, and Korea also big Chinese influence. Japan. So it's a lot to sort out in your mind or wherever you're sorting things these days. But I get the idea that dynasties kind of started around 200 BC. And there were names such as, I don't know if I can pronounce it right. The Chinese pronunciation is very unique, and it may look like one way to pronounce it, but it'll be pronounced totally different, and you won't even recognize it. But it seems like there was things going on around 200 BC, or a little earlier. Wei, way, what a we, but they won't pronounce it like that. Also, Han, and then that went on for quite some time, and I think there was a CHOU or CHU went on for a while, and this took up the first part of the Common Era. There, I said Common Era. It came out easier than AD. Somewhere probably around 600 or 700 AD. And it seems to be the first, what I look at as real serious dynasty. It was Tang, probably pronounce it something like that. And that goes on for a while. And there's a number in between. If you fast forward, you get to the very end, and you got the Ming and the Qing, the last two dynasties. The Ming starting probably 1600s, and well, maybe slightly earlier, but and then the Qing. I think the Qing is just starting late 18th century and goes right up to the present time. Well, to the last dynasty, and that was early 20th century, or early. Let's call it early. And then the last thing is pretty much the People's Republic of China, that behaves like a dynasty, and that they have their supreme leaders, and the people are all doing what they're told to do, and just like any other dynasty in the past. So, and that's pretty much the way any country runs. You got your leaders, and you got everybody else falls in line. So, so many things were accomplished in those years, not the least of the different dynasties foraging out into the hinterlands to engage other peoples in warfare for the purpose of subduing them and bringing them into their empire. And they did quite a lot of this. They did this as they advanced west. They did this going to the north. They did this going to the south and to the southwest. And right in the middle too, because China historically was just considered the eastern seaboard was China. And then they would go in, there would be parts that they would call Inner Mongolia, and these lands that were Turkish, closer to the Caspian Sea, They would go there and put those people under their yoke. It was just in every direction, every direction. The one that sticks with me a lot is only because I read Marco Polo saying that he understood that they had those armies of China had gone all the way into Burma, and they had set up set up shop in Burma. Now this, when Marco Polo was in Peking, Beijing, the Mongols, Kublai Khan, the grandson, was sitting on the throne. And so I heard that from Marco Polo. I thought that's pretty phenomenal. Burma always being a mysterious country. Yet they were able to get in there, and for a certain amount of time, short time, only I think about 70 years, they had them under their thumb. But the countries all around, the regions, the lands, the Turkish countries all around, regions above Afghanistan, below Pakistan today, all these things, Tibet, all came under, at one time or another, the thumb, the leadership, the corral, the government of China. And quite often, the way they would get through that and how they would set up government was usually the same. They would import the way they were doing government previous, and they would do the same thing. And the people that they were taking over tended to like that, or chose to do the same things themselves. So you get states like Korea, states like Vietnam, setting up government to mimic China. What they did in Vietnam was of great interest to me, because until I started reading about this, Vietnam was merely a strip of land below China that the North and the South were having some disputes. But actually, that's not really the case. The case is Vietnam goes back way more than 1,000 years. And this is just what we were talking about, the two cultures at odds with each other. The North set up its dynasty around Hanoi, and I want to say that was probably around 1000 A.D. Not absolutely sure there, but Hanoi is a very northern city. It's actually in the delta area of the Red River in North Vietnam. Today it's just Vietnam. And at one time it was just, one time it was just Vietnam. But it was only the northern part of the country. The southern part of the country had various names, one being Campra, Champra, something like that, was the name of the country, below Vietnam, which, if you look at it during the war era in the 1960s and 70s, that would have been approximately the dividing line between the North and the South. When the French took over, which they took over like in the 1700s, I believe, approximately, they named it to Chochin, China, Chochin, China. You'll still see that on a map. Actually, there was a place even in India along the seaboard, the eastern seaboard, that had the same name, and it could be that was a French, colony of some sort they had there. they had some sort of hags on that part of India, and then they took over this Chinese thing because, not this Chinese, the Vietnam thing. I think it almost sounded like nobody else wanted it. Although, monetarily, it wasn't a bad deal. I think maybe nobody else wanted it because there was too much in the warfare and piracy and all that kind of stuff going on down there. Nobody really wanted that. But finally the French got it, and they kept it for quite some time. And during World War II, they, as most people in that area, most countries, they lost their control during the war. When the war was over, they tried to get back into it. But by then, the Vietnamese were thinking independence. And then after that, after thinking independence, then became the Civil War. So this is a long way of saying that my understanding of Vietnam, when we were prosecuting that war, was almost no. Two pieces of land, supposedly one, having a civil war. And what's interesting, one of the names of one of the generals from the South Vietnamese, I believe, Nguyen and G-U-Y-E-N or something. It was a big family even back in the times that I was talking about, the 1700s. In the early formations of Vietnam, it was a big name back then. And those names of the important families in Vietnam stuck more so than in other parts of the East Asia. Vietnam was into keeping the ruling elite families, even if some of them were real stupid as far as their ability to run a country. This is back in history. I don't know anything recently or even the last 100 years or 200 years. I don't know about them. I know that they had this war in the mid-20th century. But and other East Asian dynasties, they would raise up a dumbwit son and put him on the throne. They did this all over the world, So it's not unusual. I shouldn't use the word stupid because people don't like the word stupid. But to make a long story short, as way of an introduction to the history of East Asia and all that entails, the Southeast Asian islands, the Turkestan countries all around, the Mongolia, even the interface with southern Siberia, Russia, almost to central Russia, but certainly all the way to the eastern seaboard, the interfacing with China and Russia, the back and forth with Korea and Japan, which leads me to Japan, which World War II, I was looking for why the war in the Pacific became the war in the Pacific. Well, in the 1500s, Japan was being a pirate up and down that eastern China seaboard, pirating up the Yangtze River around Shanghai and other places, which seems to be simultaneous with that country I called Champra, which is now South Vietnam. That's pretty much the way they made their livelihood: marine trading and piracy. So Japan was doing it as well, and she probably got a taste for maritime adventures, which she brought to a magnificent display in World War II. Only thing, it wasn't magnificent enough. They were deluded in their thinking they would have enough steel to make enough battleships to defeat the rest of the world. But delusion comes easy, I have found. And not only were they pirates years ago, the Japanese, They were also big in executing their leaders. That's another thing they like to do. Right up to just before the war, one of the ways of solving a controversy was to execute the other guy. So this was not really a Western type country, although they thought they were just before World War II in the Pacific. But it's all there. The threads, you could see all the threads that led to that war in the Far East, the war in the Pacific. You can, but hopefully I will talk about that more in why the war in the Pacific became the war in the Pacific. This history that I'm talking about now should be just about the Far East. And there's enough there. I mean, I could probably talk for the next 50 years on the Far East, the various countries, the way they went about conducting their business. And like I said, 15 and 16, World History for Ordinary People really should have been just one. But it had to do with 16 because it stopped, 15 stopped in the middle. But I am going to stop now and come back again to this subject in the near future. Thanks for listening. Come on, no, not yet.